Managing eye safety for PPE compliance. So I myself have always had to wear glasses, but I've only needed them for reading and for close-up work. However, as I've aged, my glasses pretty much have become a staple on my face. So when I've had to go out to visit clients, I bring my big oversized pair and I put them over my glasses. However, as someone who represents health and safety, I recognize that is hardly ideal. So, again, this is why we're all here today. So, in this webinar, Greg Nair from EyeSafeBC is joining us to help us understand the regulatory requirements for eye protection, what hazards employers should be aware of, and strategies to encourage workers to regularly don their safety glasses correctly and not on top of another pair. So thank you, Greg, for joining us today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. All right, I'll share my screen now. Okay, everybody should be seeing the presentation. So first, a little bit about myself. I'm Gregory Nair. I'm the Senior Manager of EyeSafe with the BC Doctors of Optometry. We are a nonprofit association made up of the optometrists in British Columbia. And the program EyeSafe is dedicated to promoting eye safety and eye health. And part of our proceeds go towards improving education with our optometrists here in BC. And we work very closely with our sister associations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, in Ontario, in the Atlantic provinces. And we also help assist with safety eyewear in the territories, Northwest Territories for us, and the Alberta Association with the other territories. So we do have our Western presence and then more of our national presence as well. You'll see on this first slide that it says for BC Employers Plus. And that is because, as I said, we are a BC association, and that's our region that we deal with. But we do have a lot of information in this presentation that applies to all provinces across Canada on a national level. So, for the people in Winnipeg and Calgary and Toronto, there's definitely information here that you will benefit from. And if you happen to also have employees that work in BC, then even more so for you. So perfect. Today, I'm going to be going over everything that you need to know about managing safety eyewear and the compliance of it for BC and beyond. What you will learn today is going to be about the safety regulations that will apply in your region and what different safety standards exist, and if a supplier or a product meets the necessary requirements with those standards for the local regulations. You're also going to learn how to correctly match your workplace hazards to the appropriate safety eyewear, because every workplace, every situation is different, and every face is different, and safety eyewear exists with a myriad of different options and accessories that can affect how well it can protect against different hazards. You'll also learn the best ways to ensure that your employees are actually wearing their PPE when they need it, because as we all know, I'm sure, the best eyewear in the world cannot protect you if you're not wearing it when something flies at your face. So we're going to talk a little bit about the safety eyewear compliance pyramid. I'm sure you're all familiar with the food pyramid. This one's for safety eyewear. The bottom tier, the foundation, the basis of all safety eyewear is your provincial occupational health and safety requirements. Those are set by the province that the work is done in, where the eyewear is dispensed, where it's used. And that's the baseline minimums that must be met. The next tier, one tier up, is your safety eyewear standards. So those are things like CSA or ANSI or the European EN standard. And those are usually regulated by set bodies. For CSA, it's the Canadian Standards Association. There's the American National Standards um, Inc. For ANSI, and they are in charge of creating these standards to follow. And your regulations will reference them and tell you which versions are appropriate, and if there's any differences that they want applied. Some provinces will say use this standard, but you can also make these exceptions. And then the next layer is your hazard checklist. So, like I said, every workplace is different. Every position is different. You need to look at what hazards could be affecting your employee and how to best address them. And then the final tier of the pyramid is it fitted properly? So this is in a lot of ways the most important one. And I put it at the peak because if your employee doesn't wear the eyewear, you've missed the point of safety eyewear. Uh, it has to be comfortable. It has to stay on their face. It has to, if it's a sealed frame, then it has to connect, around the face so that nothing can get in, depending on what hazards you're protecting against. So that is the most important thing. Moving on, these are your regulations broken down by province. So this is again the base of the pyramid. In Canada, employers, I'm sure you know, are responsible for ensuring that their workers have the required PPE to protect them from workplace hazards. Your occupational health and safety regulations are set by your local province where the worker is working, and they vary significantly from place to place. So eyewear that is made to work in BC may not work in Saskatchewan, for instance. Eyewear that is made to work in Ontario, very good chance that it won't work in, say, New Brunswick or Quebec. And when I say doesn't work, I mean doesn't meet the local regulations and could create liability for your company should the worst happen. So these are all the different occupational health and safety regulations from each province. Some provinces have multiple sections related to eye protection. So this isn't really an exhaustive list, but it does give you an idea of where you can find those regulations. And don't worry about screenshotting this. There will be a chance to download this presentation at the end. And of course, Make It Safe also makes it available and this recording later. So you'll be able to look at this in greater detail at another time. So let's look at how the nitty gritty actually compares between provinces a little bit. So I've just done a very simplified breakdown of the individual regulations. So you'll notice that half of the provinces, including BC, require safety eyewear to be properly fitted. Remember, that's the tip of the pyramid. And some specifically name the CSA Z94.3.1-16 guideline as the standard for it. So for those who don't know, I assume some of you may and some of you may not. The CSA standard is the one that we use for safety eyewear is Z94.3, but there is also a fitting guideline sort of extra document, which is the Z94.3.1. And that's what helps you understand connecting the right eyewear to the right employee. So that's both for you and also for the professional that is dispensing the eyewear. Maybe a little bit more for the professional dispensing the eyewear. It deals with things like how much of a gap there is between the frame and the face. And it also will make sure that, the frame isn't going to fall off when they tilt forward or something like that. The Z94.3-15, which is the 2015 version of the CSA standard, is the most common standard listed across Canada. And it does meet regulations in BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, and the Atlantic provinces. But it's worth noting that it doesn't meet the requirements of Saskatchewan or Quebec. So this is kind of what I was getting into, where eyewear made in one province may not meet the regulations of another. And that's just because the standards get updated year to year, and some provinces don't use the updated standards, and some of them will use the older standards, or they'll jump to the new ones right away. Saskatchewan and Quebec do not specifically require the safety eyewear be appropriate to applicable hazards you'll see on this table, but it can be assumed because that information is already in the CSA standard. So you see how they differ from province to province. One other thing that I'll point out is that you'll see Ontario doesn't actually require a standard. It just requires that it be properly fitted, that it's appropriate to the hazards, and that it's as prescribed and maintained in good condition. This is a standout compared to the rest of Canada, where every other province has specific rules for you need to use this version of this standard, or at least you need to use this standard or that standard. Um, Again, the most common is CSA, and the most common of that is the 2015 version. If I were to pick a favorite, which is not at all in any way fair, I'd say that I think Quebec has a really good idea of just saying you've got to use the latest version. You've got about a 2-year grace period to get updated to that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, but every province has their rules. So I cannot stress enough for employers with employees in different provinces. This is really important to track and make sure is correct. And that's part of the reason why at EyeSafe, we have everything segmented by province. So the BC Association handles the BC orders, the Alberta Association, the Alberta orders, and so on, because each of us are specialists in our local regulations. All right, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about the different associations that run these standards. So the two that you're going to really run into the most in Canada are CSA and ANSI. I'm sure you've probably heard of both of these, or at least one of them. So there's the two organizations. The CSA group, the Canadian Standards Association, began as the Canadian Engineering Standards Association back in 1999 or 1919. And it's accredited by the Standards Council of Canada, which allows it to develop standards based on internationally recognized processes. So what that means is CSA, the different committees for the different standards, will look at what already exists. They'll look at ISO, they'll look at the European options, they'll look at ANSI, they'll look at the ASTM standards, and they'll see what makes sense, and they'll take what already works and they'll adopt that, and then they might do variations of it, and they'll also do their own studies and own research to see about making it even better. ANSI is the American National Standards Institute, and unlike CSA, it actually isn't accredited by a government body, but instead it creates standards that organizations may adopt voluntarily. However, because it's often adopted by US government agencies as official standards, in practice, it's not as voluntary as it sounds on the get-go. And of course, in Canada, some of our regulatory bodies do list it as an option, like here in BC. So this is maybe a little bit more in the weeds than we need to get to for what you guys would deal with for safety eyewear orders or managing compliance, but I want you to see what the doctors look at. So this is like all the nitty-gritty little details about what's acceptable in what provinces, and like looking at the specifics of the CSA standards across the different years. So you'll see BC does not allow for the 1999 version, but it does allow the 2007 and the 2015, but doesn't allow all aspects of the 2020 standard. It specifically only allows 2007 and 15, but because much of 2020 standard meets or exceeds the 2007 or 15 standard, but not all of it, that does carry over. So it will be okay on a case-by-case basis. You can see that there isn't a single standard that goes across for yeses for all of the provinces on the top table there. And by the way, the reason that we're using these particular four versions of the standard is they're mostly the most recent ones, the last four. There is a new version of CSA in the works right now. I'm helping work with the CSA committee on it. That'll come out next year. And we know it'll be adopted in Quebec within 2 years, and other provinces may or may not adopt that or the 2020 version when the regulatory bodies decide. So the second table here will show you the differences in the impact resistance tests between the different versions of the standards. And what this shows you is that it actually is really important which version of the standard is being used because it's not always the same. So if you look at the oldest one, the one from 1999, you've got your steel ball size of 6.4 and your steel ball speed of 46.5 meters per second. And that stays in 2007. And then in 2015, the requirement drops. It goes from 6.4 to 6. And then in 2020, they add another option that's 6.35 plus or minus 5 millimeters. So it meets the requirement and the same speed. But then it has the smaller ball go at a faster speed. So it has that backwards support for the older standards. But if you're required to use one standard and it doesn't have that backward compatibility, like it creates complexity that it's easy to miss, which is why if you're using eyewear from one province in another province, it can create that liability for you. So again, it's probably more detailed than you need, but I want you to see the differences here, and you're going to see it even more in the next couple slides. This one here shows you the head form. And the head form is really important because it's what affects how well the eyewear performs on different shapes and styles of heads. So on the oldest standard that I'm showing here today from 1999, it used just a single medium head form that was supposed to work for everybody, just one head shape. And then in 2007, they added a juvenile head shape, but they switched where the head form came from. In 2015, they switched to a different supplier for the head form, and they kept the medium and the small. And then in 2020, they still have the medium and the small. So the older versions didn't have anything for smaller fit faces. The impact of that was that we had minimum frame sizes that existed in CSA. So in 1999 and 2007, we had the 40 millimeter minimum for the width of the lens and a 33 millimeter for the height of the lens. And then it wasn't until 2020 when they finally allowed for smaller frames than that. So they had the smaller head form in 2015 and even 2007, but they didn't acknowledge that smaller frames fit smaller head forms better until 2020. So what does that mean to you? That means that eyewear that is created under that 2020 standard in the provinces that allow it can have frames that are smaller than are technically allowed to work in other provinces, which is weird. Most likely that won't cause a liability issue. That's not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. But just realistically, if it meets the standard in the future, it's probably fine to use. But it's an unnecessary complexity that can lead to some issues. So just something to be aware of. This is the shockingest thing that I found in my research in the different CSA versions, which is the side shield protection. So side shield protection is what goes between the front of your frame and along the temple towards your ear. And I made this little diagram here to show how the minimum side shield protection has been shrinking over the different standards. In the 1999 standard, it was the largest, where you see like the purple line blending in with the blue line. And then in 2007 and 2015, it became that slightly smaller trapezoid shape. And then now, as of 2020, side shields can be very, very small by comparison. It's about 30% smaller than where it started in 1999. And despite being on the CSA committee, I don't actually know why that decision was made. It predates when I was involved. but my guess would be that it's to meet the ANSI standard or get closer to the ANSI standard, which has always had smaller minimum requirements for side shields. So um, that's something that definitely can create some issues for you if you are using one of the older standards, like here in BC, where we would still use 2007 or 2015. And if frames were created and CSA compliant for 2020, that's a smaller side shield minimum, which could, if it created a safety issue, then there could be an issue there for you. So that's something to be aware of. Um, Hopefully we all normalize on a similar standard in the future, and that becomes less of an issue. All right. And this is going to be the second last really complex table, I believe. This is one that our doctors look at all the time. We call it Table 5, or it's based on the Table 5 from the CSA standards. So in Canada, labs are certified to make safety lenses according to CSA requirements. I'm not aware currently of any labs in Canada that will make lenses to the ANSI standard, but that is something that is being looked at right now. So that in the future, in the next year or so, that's probably going to change. So as we saw earlier, WorkSafeBC allows either the 2007 or 2015 standard to be used, but I've also included information from the other standards before. In 1999, the only thing that was specifically stipulated on Table 5, which is what lens and coating combinations are allowed, was that the lens had to be 3 millimeters thick, except in some extreme situations where it could be as low as 2.5 millimeters based on a high prescription. So technically, all lenses still needed to pass that impact resistance testing that I showed you earlier with the steel ball of 6.4 or 6.0 millimeters going at certain speeds. But the onus was on the manufacturer to test it and ensure that it met those impact resistance standards. So perhaps concerningly, in 2007, when Table 5 was officially added to the CSA standard, they had started doing internal testing and having studies done to pre-confirm combinations of lenses and coatings and lens thicknesses, so that you would know whether it met the standard or not. And at that time, it was discovered that plastic lenses, when combined with an anti-reflective coating, no longer met the impact resistance requirements, which was a little bit scary for some people, because they'd been making these lenses with anti-reflective pretty regularly, and suddenly it no longer was found to meet the requirements. And I know that a lot of safety programs were shocked and hidden surprised by this, and it caused quite an upset at the time, and especially because plastic lenses are the ones that are typically used for tinting and sunglasses, and people would like an anti-reflective when they've got sunglasses. It makes sense. So there was a lot of issues with that, and it's still something that we're struggling with in the safety industry, because the impact resistance standards haven't changed, and there's been no changes to the plastic material or anti-reflective coatings that have solved that problem. So because of this, any provinces that are using the old version might still have that, but those, the safety eyewear made with that old 1999 version would not work in other provinces. To give you a real world example, you could use the 1999 standard in Ontario, and that would totally be fine. There are also, I believe one of the Atlantic provinces allows any CSA standard to be used. So they could choose to use that and still have the anti-reflective on plastic. But if you take that eyewear and you bring it to any other province that doesn't allow it, or specifies a different standard, then that is a real liability concern. And this is something that I spend a lot of time working on with our optometrists to make sure that everything meets these standards and none of that sneaks through. We've got a lot of protections against that. It's the biggest issue. Okay, this one will be a little bit quicker. There actually is actual information in the CSA standard for sun protection, It is entirely optional. You don't have to use it. It's not a requirement, but um, there are minimum tint densities that are required to call something sun protection. Whether it has UV protection or not is also important. So anything, any tint percentage that's less than or equal to 15%, that's considered clear lenses as far as the standard is concerned. It's not really a tinted lens. You can use it indoor, you can use it outdoor as far as the standard is concerned. Tint percentages under 60 are considered cosmetic tints. So that's, fairly tinted at that point, but it's not sun protection. And then tint percentages between 60 and 92% are considered actual sun protection and must include UV coating. Um, the cosmetic tints also must include UV coating. But again, because the standard is optional, it doesn't always have that. And that's something that's being addressed in the latest version of CSA. We've been talking about how it's difficult to know whether something meets these requirements or not. So there's discussion about potential markings in the future or information to be included with safety eyewear, whether it meets these requirements or whether it doesn't meet these requirements. So that may change in the future. Um, yeah, I don't know how many of you would require safety eyewear with sun protection, but this is something to consider. As far as our program is concerned, every time something gets tinted, if it doesn't initially have UV protection already, just inherent in the material of the lens, then it's always added. From our perspective, it's not an optional thing. We consider it a mandatory thing. So, and even our labs do not offer tinting without UV protection, just to cover their bases as well. So it's getting harder through any significant channels to get safety eyewear with tinting that doesn't have UV protection, which I think is a good thing because it's better protective, of course. All right. So we're going to do a quick recap. This is based on the rules in BC. Just a quick look at it. No safety lens can be thinner than 2 millimeters at the thinnest point. For Trivex, which is one of the 3 materials that are allowed to use in safety eyewear, it can be up to 2.5 millimeters. And for plastic, it has to be 3 millimeters. There's never any exceptions below that 2 millimeters. 1.99 does not meet the regulations in BC or the CSA standards. No such thing as good enough. It's the hard minimum. Lenses must always be firmly mounted to ensure that the necessary protection is there in the event of an impact. This is super important, and it's something that the labs on the manufacturing end have to check in order to stamp the lens. And it's also something that the dispensing optometrist should always be checking. If you ever have a situation where an employee says that the lens falls out of their safety eyewear, that needs to be brought back to the clinic right away. It's not enough to just like put it back in. They need to address maybe the screw isn't tight enough, or maybe part of it's been stripped down and it's getting loose. Maybe the eyewear needs to be replaced. Maybe the lens needs to be replaced. It might be a simple thing, but either way, like it needs to be addressed because if a lens can fall right out of the frame, it's not going to have that impact protection. Lenses have to meet the Table 5 requirements in the CSA standards, either by choosing a pre-approved item or receiving confirmation of a properly tested impact resistance option. But generally, it's going to have to be from Table 5 unless you want to go through a pretty substantial study on a different material and coating combination. The manufacturing lab must apply their safety certification stamp to at least one of the two lenses. And also the frame also has to have a stamp. We'll talk about frames in a second. Some employees complain about the safety stamp on the lens, and I get it. It can be irritating. It can be a distraction, in your peripheral vision if there's like a stamp in the corner. It gets in the way of things sometimes, but it is a requirement, and it's a way that you can tell that these lenses are made to the standard, and it also protects you from liability in the future because if something was made with that stamp, and you saw that and you knew that it was safe, and if the lab put it on there and it didn't meet the requirements, then that's you meeting your requirements, but it's not them meeting theirs. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Looking at the frames, frames must have a certification stamp as well, either CSA or ANSI, depending on what your regulations allow. Um, all safety frames must be provided with side shields. That's a really easy thing to miss. Both CSA and ANSI, which are the two standards that are used all across Canada, require side shields with the eyewear. Now, where it differs is CSA requires them to be permanently fitted, whereas ANSI allows them to be detachable. And then some provinces play with that a little further, where they will require CSA, but still allow the side shields to be detachable. It's an exception to that particular standard. So, but in every case, they need to have the side shields because the side shields need to be worn when the eyewear is protecting you from hazards. Otherwise, it's not going to protect you. The frames must be in good condition. Um, Pretty simple, but it's easy to overlook. The concept of, oh, it's good enough can fall into your head very easily. Don't listen to that. uh, your local optometrist will usually be able to tell you if it's a good condition or not. If you are reusing a frame and just putting new lenses in it, the lab will always be checking to make sure that the eyewear is going to be able to handle that impact resistance expectation. So, they're very good at checking over the eyewear, and they will reject frames that are not in good enough condition. And you know what? Even a flawed frame that's brand new, it's very rare that it happens, but manufacturing is a mass production thing. So, if a lab comes across a frame that's brand new and it doesn't come across as sturdy enough, they will look at it, they'll test it internally, and they'll reject it. And it has happened occasionally. It's very rare, but it does happen. And that's another layer of protection that is there for you and your workers. Um, the frame must be properly fitted to the worker, ensuring no pain points and that the frame doesn't just slip or fall off with regular use. That's very important. We actually created a tool to help with measuring gaps, and we have a perfect fit checklist that we give to all of our optometrists that are part of the program to make sure that they go through point by point, looking at the different areas of the face to make sure that the seal is correct, that there isn't too many big gaps, and that everything fits comfortably and it's going to be sturdy and not off balance. So it's very, very important. And of course, the frame choice must be appropriate to the workplace hazards that it protects against. Otherwise, it's not going to do the job. So let's talk a little bit about the different kind of hazards that exist for your hazard checklist. This is the third layer of the pyramid. I know second layer is really long, but the other two layers are short. Here in the third layer of the pyramid, we now get to confirm what hazards the worker needs protection from. Every workplace is different, and different tasks, even on the same work site, can have different safety needs. These are just a handful of examples of different hazards a worker could be exposed to, each with an impact on what kind of safety eyewear and PPE the worker would need. So you might have, flying objects or have a risk of impact, dust, particulate, or even just, like strong wind can be an issue. Of course, infectious or chemical droplets, mists, sparks, too much light, too much heat, lasers or other forms of radiation, um, and arc flashes. Some of these are much more difficult to get prescription eyewear for than others, but for the most part, you can find something to provide that solution. Sometimes, with arc flashes, for example, it would be a face shield with a prescription insert that goes behind it. So these are some of the solutions that exist within safety frames to protect against those hazards. Obviously, side shields are a mandatory thing. Gaskets are the seals, the different types of seals that exist between the frame and your face. And some of them have indirect venting to help prevent fog, which is a big concern for some people. There is the ANSI D3 certification. It's a sub-certification within the ANSI standard against droplets. And there's also the D4 version, which is certification against dust. And there's even a further, I didn't mention here, D5 certification, which is for extremely fine dust. And those are the hardest to get in prescription eyewear. And I'll be honest, I only found a solution yesterday. That's why I didn't mention it in the presentation, but we're going to be adding that very soon to our program. I'm very excited about that. partial, full, and rubberized seal gaskets are the three different types of gaskets that exist on safety eyewear. So a partial is just going to be along the brow, sometimes called a brow bar or a dust dam. Full goes around the brow and then down past the cheeks on the top and bottom of your face around the eyewear. And rubberized seals are obviously like a full seal, but they're made of rubber. They really like slide against the face itself, and they're usually more common with like chemical protection or really extreme liquid environments. But fine dust could also be involved. Non-conductive certification. People that work with electricity, you need non-conductive eyewear. There is a lot of protective eyewear out there that meets that requirement. You can get some really nice looking ones at this point. So you're very well covered if you need that. Specialized lens coatings, anti-fog, anti-glare, anti-blue light, those all exist. There's also new coatings or tinting options that protects against the high intensity lights used for growing, like grow ops or food production. They're called HPS or high pressure sodium tints, and they're extremely helpful for that. Welding clip-ons, they're available, or RX inserts for the face shields. Um, Full face respirators with RX inserts, very, very helpful for getting that prescription there. And just, unobstructed peripheral vision, which means completely transparent eyewear that's clear, and you just get like the full side vision without anything, well, without almost anything blocking your vision. This is our perfect fit checklist that I mentioned earlier, and it brings us back to the point of the pyramid, the fourth layer, how to make sure it's fitted properly. And this is something that even your health and safety professionals on site can use to double check that the eyewear is protective on site with the person as they're using it. Are there pressure points on the side of the head behind the ears? Can you see clearly in all the directions? When you tilt your head forward, are they going to fall off your face? Is there a big gap between the face and the frame? And does it cover your whole eye area between the eyebrow and any soft tissue around it? It's 7 quick tests, and it's all based on that CSA guideline I mentioned before, Z94.3.1. And every optometrist that works in our program is prepared with this, and it's actually a part of the optician training process, not the specific checklist, but the concept of it, to make sure that the eyewear is properly fitted. And also, non-prescription safety eyewear also needs to be fitted to the worker to ensure that it meets these requirements. So I know that everything I've talked about has mostly been geared towards prescription eyewear because that's what I work with, 99% of the time. But the reality is also that non-prescription eyewear also needs to be fitted to the employee's face, and it also has to protect against these hazards. And it's a lot easier to forget or miss these things when you're just placing an order for 50 or 100 or 10 disposable plastic eyewear that doesn't have prescription in it. You just hand them out to people because it's easy. But it is important to make sure they fit properly. And again, we do have a fitting tool that helps with this that I can make available for those who need it, which is just for measuring the gaps between face and frame if that's something that people are interested in. And we also provide that to our optometrists. All right, so let's talk about some of the do's and don'ts. So don't let workers wear unfitted PPE. That's the biggest don't. It's got to fit them properly. If the safety eyewear wasn't specifically chosen for the worker, then it's not going to fit. It's not going to protect them. Don't assume that unknown PPE meets compliance. If you don't know how the eyewear was made, if you don't know that it meets the requirements of your work site, then don't assume that it does either. I know that some companies, they like to just say, hey, go out, we're going to reimburse you. Just go find some safety eyewear that meets your prescription, and then we'll cover the cost for you, or we'll cover a portion of the cost. make sure that whatever they bring in, that they have their side shields, make sure that if it needs to be sealed to their face, that it is sealed to their face, or give them a list of things in advance. What our program does is we have what's called criteria sheets that we work with every employer for every situation, and every eyewear needs to meet the minimum requirements. So it's not just about the minimum standards set by the regulatory body, it's also about the minimum standards that every employer has, and that can differ from work site to work site or task to task or employee to employee. Don't forget that eyes should be tested every 2 years. That's the bare minimum. Some people with different health conditions, it might need to be even more frequently. So if somebody has been using the same prescription safety eyewear for 3, 4 years, first of all, those coatings do not last that long. I've worked at a lab. I can tell you 100% that those coatings have degraded. And two, their prescription needs to be retested. They probably need a brand new pair of eyewear. Don't overlook the impact of sun or heat. I have had so many employees have eyewear where their nose pads melt because of the high impact of heat in their work environment. And there's other options out there that are better able to handle high heat. So if that's an issue that happens in your workplace, or there's high heat issues, then mention that in your hazard assessment, and if you're working with us, let us know what's on your criteria sheet, and we can make sure that the eyewear doesn't melt in the heat for you, or at least the nose piece. People like the melting nose pieces because they're much more comfortable than the solid ones that don't melt. Don't reuse impacted PPE. Prescription safety eyewear and non-prescription safety eyewear, they're not indestructible. They're a lot of people think that with bulletproof vests, but you shoot a bulletproof vest once and it's expired. That's done. You have a new one. And the same thing with safety eyewear. If it stops an impact, it's done its job, but it needs to be replaced. Um, like that is even if it looks good, even if you don't know about the micro cracks inside of it, that could impact its resistance in the future. These are the don'ts. Let's look at the do's. Uh, so communication is very important. Uh, hold on. There you go. Do check in with your workers about their PPE. Communication is very important, especially if your worker isn't wearing their PPE when they should be. Is it uncomfortable? Is it too heavy? Maybe not enough peripheral vision. Maybe the fog's up. There are solutions to all of these issues, and hazards can change over time. So it's good to, communicate and make sure that everything with the employee is being handled correctly. Reassess your workplace and the hazards regularly. Your PPE requirements may change, and it needs to be kept up to date and appropriate to the time. Supply your workers with eye prescriptions or prescription eyewear. A lot of people, and I hear this at trade shows all the time, they say their safety manager, doesn't need glasses themselves, so they don't understand that, over the glasses PPE is not really ideal. It doesn't allow for precision work. The extra barrier from between on your vision between you and your work can be quite difficult to manage. So, don't overlook the importance of prescription eyewear. Double check your provincial regulations. They change. They don't change very frequently. You can probably double check it once, maybe twice a year, but just keep an eye on them. Make sure that you're still in compliance. And do ask for help. There are lots of people out there that do this every day. It's their eat, sleep, and breathe it, right? I'm always available. You don't even have to be part of my program. I'm happy to help. Our mandate at the BCGO is about eye safety and eye health. My email address is at the end of this. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. I want to make a difference. And there's other associations out there across Canada for every province that are also focused on eye health and eye safety. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, everybody. There are people that you can talk to. We are happy to help, and we do this all the time. And of course, the wonderful people at the Manufacturing Safety Alliance. I know that they are always there to help as well, and they're phenomenal people. And I am so grateful to work with them and to get to spend time at their events as well. So Oh yeah, and of course, consider using a provincial safety eyewear program. It's probably the number one thing I can recommend. I'm absolutely biased, but I hope that I've shown that there is a large amount of complexity in regulations, and it varies a lot between province. And it really does benefit you to have somebody who is always up to date, who is an expert in this field specifically, there to protect you from liability, there to protect your employees from harm. And when you're dealing with the provincial safety eyewear program, especially one if it's run by a nonprofit association that's local in the community and helping build the community, then the work that you do with them also benefits the eye health and eye care and eye protection of everybody in your province, which I think is a pretty great thing. So I hope that you found this informational. I hope you have questions. I'd love to answer them. That QR code can be used to download a copy of this presentation, but of course, it will be emailed to you as well by the lovely people at Make It Safe. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me if you don't get to hear from today or you come up with something in the future. And I believe Doris has got some questions for me.
Yes. Well, thank you, Greg. That was very informative. And unfortunately, I definitely am part of the don't do category from my sharing of my earlier story. So, yes, so that is not a good thing. So I'm glad that you have all these helpful takeaways for us. So, one of the first questions, we've got a lot of questions coming in. So, one of the first questions has been the slide regarding the regulations by province didn't include the territories. So, perhaps if I don't know if you can comment on the standards in the north, or maybe it would just be easier if you can share that information later afterwards. We could send that out to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I saw people checking in at the beginning, I saw somebody was from Yellowknife, and I'm like, there's nothing in here that specifies what goes on in the Northwest Territories. And I was like,
Yeah.
darn it.
Yeah.
So I don't have that information off the top of my head,
Okay. No
but
worries. We
it
can
may
share
fall
it.
under the federal standards. But I
Hmm.
will double check that and get back to you. Darius, if you can get me like their contact information, I will absolutely follow up on
Absolutely.
that.
Okay, great. Our team will send that to you. And then I know for ourselves, like for health and safety, there's been some talk of harmonizing the regs across Canada because many companies have multiple locations. Are eyewear requirements expected? Is there any talk of harmonizing that as well?
Well, so I'm closest to WorkSafeBC in terms of the different regulatory bodies for obvious
Hmm.
reasons. And they've asked me to make a request for changes. So that's on my to-do list for 2026 is to make some recommendations on that.
Hmm.
I'm confident that we will see improvements, but I'm equally confident that it's years away because none of these regulatory bodies move quickly, nor
Hmm.
should they. These are not decisions that should be made, on a dime.
Yeah.
So we should, yeah, I think it will improve. It's a
Hmm.
personal mission of mine to try to get as many provinces, on a similar page as possible. How realistic it is that everybody's going to end up with the same standard at the same time frame, I really can't say. But I think it will get better than it is now. And yeah, I'm absolutely going to do everything I can to improve the situation for in any way I can.
Great, thank you. So, another question, as both the lens and frames have to meet criteria mentioned, are there any regulations that prevent an optical provider from using non-standard lenses in standard frames or vice versa, or repairing either part with non-standard parts?
That is a great question. So the certification really happens at two different points. So the frame manufacturing, when it's manufactured, it gets stamped with whatever standards it meets. So that's going to be right there physically on the frame. It's not even printed. It's usually like an actual stamp, like an emboss or a deboss directly into the plastic or metal material of the frame. If it's metal, it is printed, I guess. So it's hard to remove that by intent. When the lenses are mounted into the frame, in the case of prescription eyewear, that is when it gets certified. So if those lenses or frame are modified after the lens stamping, then there's
Mhm.
no way to really be sure of that. So it is a possible concern. It shouldn't be happening, but it's not impossible. If you're getting something from an optometrist and they get that stamp in it, then it should be good coming straight from them. But I mean, if you want to throw specific examples, I could probably tell you how likely it is, but generally that
Okay.
doesn't really happen. But no, there's no like written law to prevent it, but
Okay.
it would open liability, so nobody would really want to take that risk on, typically speaking, either.
Right, right. Okay. So what about people who use progressives? Not naming any
Progressives.
names.
Yes. Okay, so progressives are great. They are available in safety eyewear. Our program definitely offers them.
Okay.
Some programs will require that an employee uses progressives in their day-to-day eyewear before using it in safety eyewear. And the reason
Oh
for
yeah.
that is it's a safety thing.
Mhm.
Because if it's your first time wearing progressives, you can get like swimming effects. You can have a difficult time adapting to them. You might get some dizziness in the first couple of days. And we don't want anybody going up on a ladder or operating heavy machinery when they might be dealing with these conditions. So,
Mhm.
it's just a simple thing. If you already use progressives in your eyewear in day to day, then yeah, you're fine to get them in safety eyewear.
Okay, great. So I mean, I know there are many people on this call, and I'm sure most of them that need safety glasses as part of their PPE in their at their workplace probably have boxes of those plastic glasses that are wrapped in plastic, and they just hand them out like candy as visitors come and go. So, and even to their workers as they need them, that's what they're using, right? As I mentioned earlier, even for myself. So the big question I think everybody has on their mind is what's an approximate cost
Yeah,
for this for workers? And again, just basic, what average would you be looking at?
absolutely. Okay, so I can speak for our program, and then I can kind of give you an idea of what I've seen elsewhere, more on like the retail side.
Hmm.
So for us, a basic pair of single vision would start about $150.
Okay.
And then progressives, you're probably looking in more like the 225, 235 is where you would start.
Okay.
Bifocals and anti-fatigue, which are kind of like baby progressives, those would be more in between in like the 175, 200 range.
Hmm.
And they can go up from there. With our program, it's pretty hard to spend more than $500, and that's if you're going for all the bells and whistles, assuming you're allowed to. Uh,
Hmm.
we find that we're about half the price of
Okay.
most of what's out there.
Wow.
Um,
Good to know.
I have had people find safety eyewear for $200 if they went really really low end, and they got like an $80 discount. I had a friend who didn't use me to get safety glasses last week, and I gave them some heck. And they looked at $280 was their bill, and they got an $80 discount because it said they only got coverage for $200.
Mm.
So and that was about where our 150 would have been. Um,
Okay.
so that's pretty comparable, I would say.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So, and do most medical plans cover prescription safety glasses, or are you seeing maybe it's becoming more common and before it wasn't? You
Are you
familiar?
talking like insurance plans?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like employee benefit, like work plans,
So a
for
lot of them can. It's more
hmm
up to the employee if they choose to use them that way, because typically they'll have a vision plan that covers like
Oh,
any
okay.
prescription
So it's
eyewear.
vision or safety eyewear
So a lot of
coverage.
employers will offer an additional subsidy for safety eyewear to make
Okay.
sure that the employee is actually getting it and that it's meeting the requirements. And as for what the employee will cover, it really varies across the board. Some of them will
Hmm.
join our program and they won't cover any additional amounts, but because employees are paying basically half the price that they pay retail, then at least they're getting more bang for their buck.
Right.
Others will come in and say, well, we'll offer like 200 or 250. Some will come in and say, we'll cover everything. Some will cover, like 400 or 500. It
Hmm.
depends on a lot of factors.
Oh, of course. Yes. Okay. So I know you mentioned and you did speak to fogging up and that kind of stuff, but there is a question about the fog up for especially in cold environments. if an employer has people that go in and out, like I know like freezers, in and outside, if they're going back and forth, on the forklifts, that kind of thing, in and out of the warehouse. What can be used or help with that?
Okay. So I've done a bunch of research into anti-fog options, so I'm happy with this
Hmm.
question. Uh, there are two types of anti-fog that can be applied to lenses. There's going to be at the lab level, which is like a spun-on coating to the lens before it's edged into the frame. Those are going to be embedded a lot better into your lens. They're going to last a lot longer. They're still probably only in the last maybe 6 months to a year if you're lucky.
Okay.
And those are great, but they also cost quite a bit. You're usually looking at, from us, you're going to be looking at probably about like 80 or $100.
Oh,
There's some
okay.
price changes coming in just for the coating. It's really
Hmm.
expensive,
Okay.
um, as coatings go. I mean, it's not the most expensive, but um, they do a really good job. There
Okay.
are aftermarket sprays, like anti-fog sprays that you can apply. I have looked into those extensively. I looked at about 20 different types from all over, made in North America, made in Asia, all different brands, all different promises. And I've had mixed results. And it also really depends on the material of the lens and also what other coatings are already on the lens, how well it works. But the the results that I've seen are that almost no matter what, you're going to have to reapply it every day. And if you apply it too hard, you're also wiping it off while you apply it. And
Okay.
it's a really difficult balance to apply it properly and across the entire lens without removing it at the same time. Uh, I want to offer anti-fog spray, and I have not found one that I think is easy enough to apply that people would
Hmm.
be happy with and would work well enough so that I can offer it as part of our program offer. But yeah,
Okay.
if I ever find one, it'll be on the program.
Okay, well, not an easy fix, but ongoing. Stay
Yeah.
tuned, right?
Yep.
Sorry, we are just about out of time. We've got 1 minute left. So the questions that we weren't able to get to, we will definitely forward to Greg and send them out to everyone that's attending and ensure that we get these answers back to you. So yeah, like there's just so many questions, Greg. So you're going to
That's
be
awesome.
busy after. So thank you again for joining us today and for providing all this very valuable information. And of course, thank you to everybody that's attending. In closing, I just have a few announcements. If you guys all on behind the scenes will stay tuned. Just want to mention our last webinar of 2025 is coming up December 10th. This one will be an Ask Me Anything session about core. So if your company is interested in, getting to that standard, with MSABC, it's OC certification, the benefits, the steps, and where to get support. So please bring your questions and join us. Um, in addition to that, for those that are familiar with us, nominations for the 2026 Safety Excellence Awards are now open as well. Celebrate a leader, a team member, your safety committee, or company with a nomination. Learn more about the awards, including two new ones for 2026 at the link in the chat. And then lastly, thank you all for making time to join us today. As always, visit us online anytime for help or to access our webinars and resources. Watch for an email with a link to the recording of today's webinar and a survey link to share your feedback and topic ideas and anything we can do better. We always welcome the feedback. So thank you again and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.